Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode. This is our 778 episode. We have our world famous speaker, Mr. Mike, Mr. Justin, and Mr. Daniel. We do discuss on potential solution for the economic singularity. First, I would like to give chance, Mr. Mike.
Dr. Sharif, thank you for having us on again. We're going to be talking a little bit about the economic singularity again. You might have seen in the news, there's a lot of news about artificial intelligence and some of the new software. And some of the applications are of interest to us because we know that some of these pieces of software are getting to the point where they can actually do the same kind of work that you and I do. And what we're going to talk about today is some news that came out. Goldman Sachs, Dr. Sharif, if you're able to put up that graphic, I don't need it right away, but Goldman Sachs put out a very good report on some of what they call generative artificial intelligence. And they're trying to differentiate between narrow intelligence, general intelligence. They're calling it generative. So it's something new, something different. A lot of people talking about GPT-4, ChatGPT. Okay, so let me just do the quick summary of what Goldman Sachs had to say so you don't have to read the 100-page report or whatever. He said that generative artificial intelligence raises this question. Are we on the brink of a rapid acceleration in task automation that will drive labor cost savings and raise productivity? The answer is yes. AI could eventually increase annual global GDP by 7%. Could the labor market face significant disruption due to generative AI? The answer is yes. Generative AI could substitute 25% of current work, exposing the equivalent of 300 million full-time jobs to automation. Now, the graphic is from the report here. And what they're showing is a series of different countries and what their estimate is of how much work might be automated in each of these countries. And it's just a guideline. So you see the US more towards the right, 25%. And then as you go to the left, you might see some other countries that are closer to, for example, Bangladesh. Dr. Sharif and I had a brief conversation about what might be closest in terms of the economy between Bangladesh and some of the listed ones here. And he indicated India. And you'll see India is all the way to the left there at about maybe 12% of the work might be done by robots in the near future, which would mean you might be facing losing your job because of a robot taking your work. And this is the point of the economic singularity, is that the computer software is getting to the point where humans are going to start losing their jobs because the bots are cheaper. They work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Okay, so this is very important. The other thing I want to stress with this report is Goldman Sachs discounted the physical labor that could be done, which I think is an error. They're saying that artificial intelligence is mostly doing the paper shuffling office jobs. And I'm thinking that when you add this artificial intelligence into some of the new robots that are coming out, you all have seen the YouTube videos, Boston Dynamics robots jumping and throwing tool bags up. And, there's a time coming up pretty soon when machines are going to be able to use this generative AI to do your job physically or cognitively. It's called cognitive automation for a reason. So this is another update for you guys that this is something to watch. This is a worldwide phenomena. You're not going to be able to escape it just because of the country you happen to be in. You could be in Europe, you could be in Africa, you could be in North America, you could be in Asia. It doesn't matter. So a lot of people are going to face losing their jobs. Okay. So what we've done is we've created a group called the Omni-Futurists, a small group of us trying to think of how can we make life a little bit easier as we transition from what we have today to the future that we hope will be flourishing abundance. This transition is going to be difficult for everybody. And we have two great guys on today with us, Jason and Daniel. Both of these guys are very original thinkers. And they have, this is something I've looked for actively for the Omni Futurists, is people who have a different perspective. Because if you just use the same old ideas, you come up with the same answers, you're not exploring all the possibilities. And so I'll wrap this up by saying I hope that Jason and Daniel are able to tell you some of the alternate potential solutions for the economic singularity.
Thank you, Mr. Mike. Now I request Mr. Jason.
Sure. Yeah, actually, it's interesting. It's a bit of a paradox with GPT. My particular solution is kind of a focus on economic transformation rather than simple survival. Like some of the solutions that we have are aimed at kind of surviving the economic singularity, in the sense of there are a lot of people losing their jobs, or soon to lose their jobs. Talking a quarter on that chart, like a quarter of the population of any given country. Where what we're like immediately trying to do as a short term is trying to keep those people alive and help people get through it. Whereas my approach has always been, I guess, a little bit different. I mean, Michael talks about people with different thinking styles, and mine has always been a little bit different in the sense that it's aimed at abundance from the start through economic transformation, and it achieves that economic transformation through an organization, a for-profit organization in particular. And there's different forms. I mean, Michael's explored a few himself. There's different forms of organization where it's about socioeconomic transformation with a business, a profitable business that can attract large amounts of funding. But then it becomes a lot easier with technologies like GPT-4 and generative AI. People are looking at using those technologies to market, to generate new products, to writing books, business literature. I come from a consulting, risk, engineering, and data engineering background, big data background. So for me, it kind of came together naturally of seeing some of the different technologies combined with my line of work. So that's the meat of it. I'm not really going to get into the root cause that I believe yet. I think I'd like to pass it on to Daniel just to kind of give the time a little bit here.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel.
Yeah, so honored to be invited to participate in Omni Futurists, Mike, and thanks for the invite. I'm kind of coming at this with a little bit of a local political perspective, having run 3 elections in a row for local city council, but I did it kind of like it was a jury duty position, which, how you get picked for jury duty. It's a process where any registered voter is in the jury pool. So, it'd be nice if we could actually move our politicians closer to the community level. And in fact, they just announced that they're going to look at transitioning from at-large government to a district-based government. So next time I run, I'll have a smaller group of voters to campaign around. But I really think we need to use digital tokenization to identify political and non-political solutions as well. And I'm thinking there's a couple great digital resources for doing this. One is called POAP, which is a proof of activity protocol. There's a website called poap.xyz, and anyone can mint this kind of digital souvenir that covers either they were at an event or they did something. Maybe they solved a problem, answered a quiz. And the other great site is called Kialo.com, and that's just this forum for discussions and debates. You put up a thesis statement, you put up the pros and cons, and then people it can either be a public or a private community that debates and discusses. It's kind of a Socratic method, but I'm thinking this could be done not only online but also using kind of non-digital technology, because we don't know if the grid is going to stay up forever and for how long. I mean, there have been solar events that would have burned out our modern technological grid. There was one in 1859, I believe, called the Carrington event, where it was this huge explosion on the sun, and telegraph offices actually burst into flames because of the induced voltage along the wires. So, and they've done studies. If this happened today, it would take about $3 trillion in 10 years to rebuild, and there would be massive, massive casualties and depopulation in the meantime. And this looming future surge, I like David Wood's author David Wood's term for it, which kind of lumps together the AI, runaway super intelligence, the economic singularity, all these possible, bundles of accelerating trends, which we're not prepared for, is the future surge. So I'm writing what I call the future surge resilience plan, and it's a multifaceted plan with lots of hands-on kinds of solutions. Involves things like seasteading, for one. There's a X Prize carbon removal X Prize group I'm working with, and they've done the calculation that if we had a 30-kilometer wide band of seasteads going around the equator, and that's about half water and half land, I guess, at the equator. But if we grew kelp and hemp and papyrus, bamboo, oysters, mussels, we could actually we could basically undo all the Industrial Revolution carbon excess problem that's disrupting the biosphere and the climate pretty badly. So that's a fun project. There's actually things like these wave generators. They look like ducks' heads. They're called nodding duck wave generators. And this was all highly worked out in the lab in the UK in the 80s. And someone cut their funding because of a deliberate error that said, oh, this won't be cost effective. But actually, it was hugely cost effective to build these. So if we could build these V-shaped floating structures that harness the wave energy, and then behind it, you've got calm water. And then you've got, kind of a natural floating breakwater system. And another thing is Eddenicity. I would point people toward Kev Polk's plan for Eden-like cities. And these are car-free cities that use high-density housing and lots of regenerative power. And they've got they're connected. Nothing is more than like a 15-minute trip from anywhere else. I think you've heard the 15-minute city term is being bandied about at some high level. Levels of policy making. But anyway, it looks like our governments are just seemingly clueless about addressing the future surge. So that's why I'm so glad we've got a group of future facing experts that are designing a solution. And when's our paper looking to come out on this, Mike? We're going to collect our
towards the end of the year.
Towards the end of the year,
we're going to try to publish a book that has all of our concepts.
Yeah, so I don't want to take up too much time. I'll pass the baton back to the host there.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mike, when we discussing about economic singularities and Bangladesh is near India, what do you think? We have around 57% youth, then 80 million people, those who are youth in our country, under 30 years old. So they have to compete with AI and robotics in the futures for getting jobs, or how they can improve their skills and their education level. What is your advice?
Yeah. Even though sometimes we talk about a loss of a lot of jobs, it's very important for the youth to not give up on preparing for a career. You got to do your education. You got to learn, even if the robots do everything and provide everything for us, you're going to want to know about history, about the world, about philosophy, about science. Just because the bots are doing the work doesn't mean we're going to not think. So it's very important for the youth to get involved that way. The other aspect is for them to get involved politically, because we're all going to have to try to impress upon our governments that we need to be taken care of. So they need to get involved, and we would like them to start preparing whatever they think are the best approaches. Now, the two gentlemen who are on here with me, I really love the compare and contrast between us. Daniel and I have a lot of things in common. I like agroforestry. He likes permaculture. He's a permatrails guy. We both think locally and grassroots. My friend Jason thinks top down globally and is a lot more optimistic than I am. By the way, Jason has a very strong supporter recently, our good friend David Woods, and the author of The Economic Singularity, Callum Chase. They have a podcast, The London Futurists. Their most recent one, Jason, Callum came out and said, there's a chance that artificial intelligence is moving so rapidly that we may not have an economic singularity. The guy who wrote the book, he said that there's a possibility that we get to artificial general intelligence so quickly that that suite of software can come up with a solution that solves the problem, rather than us having to go through a brutal Great Depression era type unemployment streak. So, part of the reason why I wanted a group of people who think completely differently is nobody knows what the future is going to be. And anybody who tells you they know what's going to happen next, they're lying. Okay, don't believe them. You got to keep your mind open. Back to Dr. Sharif's comment to our youth, we got to tell them to keep their mind open. Don't listen to what the old farts like us tell you. Decide on your own what is the best way to go about it. Okay, so anyway, that we're seeing that with the compare and contrast and the push and pull. It's very polite and we're very respectful, but we all have different opinions on what would be the best way to go. So, Jason, I'd like to hear some more about your concepts.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, I have a few comments on the previous comments, but I'll definitely get into my stuff a little bit and kind of weave them together as I can. Yeah, it's interesting. Actually, you mentioned that we've talked about the timing. We realized that there was kind of a timing element to this with economic singularity, AGI, and abundance, and that the longer that there is between the economic singularity, where it gets good enough to displace a lot of jobs, between then and AGI occurring, the longer that goes on, the longer that there's going to be this global suffering or global lack of employment, and that kind of draws that out, right? So if it's so fast, like Callum Chase says, that we achieve AGI, and then shortly after, like, it solves the problems, and then there's abundance, and but this kind of ties into my other bit, where I think Daniel mentioned, like, we've got all these tech, and I'm a firm believer that we have all this tech that it could be done already. Like my initial thoughts on this, even thinking over years, I wasn't assuming at all AGI. It was using existing tech. It was using big data and survey systems and machine learning and like existing technologies and stuff that is going to exist in the next year or two, and just the right combination of it. But then I realized what it was. It wasn't technology. It was the global consciousness, the global approach of the way that people think about the problem and the philosophies, and I call it memetics, but it's an underlying co-evolutionary process between the ideas that we come up with, like cultural and genetic co-evolutionary process, I think is a proper scientific term. But then that kind of global consciousness and the way that it's perceived, and the embedding of the systems of that ideology of capitalism, whatever we want to call it, is the real elephant in the room that's so big that human beings are having a hard time grappling with the economic problem, with the problem that it presents. So I'm not going to get into that anymore, but I just wanted to say that I think that's why, like, that's the reason that AGI it's going to take AGI, is because throughout all of history, human beings have tried this. Beings have tried to find ways to solve this economic problem of matching subjective human needs to objective materialism, and people haven't done it. We still are having difficulties with it. So I do think it's going to take at least some sort of combination of advanced tech or AGI to do it, just to be able to grapple with the sheer scale of the data and the bias in human decision making, and the amount of data that's out there, and then there's something else, like this kind of ideological warfare that's going on between politics and organizations and that kind of thing. On back to your question, Dr. Sharif, on what to do for the youth. I've asked myself that question because I was kind of thinking I would go and get some certifications and go get an MBA. And then I found out that GPT passed the MBA, and I found out that GPT passed all the certifications that I would want to do. And I was like, okay, what's the point anymore? If this is already happening now, it would take me a few months or a year or whatever to go get those things. But I asked GPT the question, what should I do? And it said, no, the human creativity and what's coming out from the application of skill and the application of intelligence is still well beyond what those systems can come up with so far. The knowledge, certainly we're falling behind already. You can ask it and it knows more than a human being will ever know. But the application of skill in a business setting, in a real-time environment, using nonverbal communication, however you want to say it, it's not there yet. And the other thing I'd like to say about that, the last thing, is that AGI, if and when it comes, won't necessarily have the same interests as us. Think of it like a parent and a child. That if the child grows up and says, I'm moving out, or I don't want to live on your roof anymore, I don't want to do what you're asking me to, we're going to have to solve our own problems at some point as well, because that child may not want to help solve those problems for us. So yeah, get your educations and try to help solve the problem.
Thank you. Mr. Daniel.
Unmute. Yeah, I think there is a big economic elephant in the room, and I think it's called monopoly capitalism. We monopolize things that never should have been monopolized, like the land. There's only so much land. No one created it. It was just there, and someone threw up a fence and started charging. I mean, we still tax property owners. Okay, so if we just increased the idea of paying rent on the land you're monopolizing, in a fair way, we could actually pay for all the infrastructure that is needed by the commons. The medical care, the roads, all the stuff government provides, the courts, the defense. This could probably be done with like a flat 10% annual tax on people that are monopolizing. And the main thing that gets monopolized is land. But it also applies to things like the atmosphere, the oceans, things that you didn't create that are commonwealths. There's a famous author named Henry George who wrote a book called Progress and Poverty back in 1876. And it was an inquiry into this structural inequality that's created by letting people monopolize things that should never have been monopolized. So I call that monopoly capitalism. And I think we need to transition to something called equity capitalism or stakeholder capitalism, where, because people, they want things and they want good things and they want to minimize pain. And the supply and demand system in the market is pretty good at allocating resources. And, I think you'd actually find a lot of so-called capitalists and socialists would be on the same page if we weren't monopolizing things like land. I'm in favor of what I call the Nordic model. It's kind of a hybrid capitalist system where you've got lots of basic infrastructure necessities being provided very readily and very efficiently. In fact, Norway has the most per capita number of billionaires. People think, oh, Norway, that's such like a socialistic, place. But no, it's actually, you've got education free. You've got revolutions in incarceration where it's handled more like an outpatient, basis. There's, they don't use the word race in Norwegian law. They just outlawed that because race is a biological fiction, and it never should have really caught on. It's like, saying the differences between humans are like the differences between dog breeds. No, it's just like a biological fallacy. So, they have Norway has the highest electric car rollout so far of any country. So, and people could say, well, yeah, they have all the wealth from the North Sea oil, so it's not a really great test case or use case. But anyway, that's my thoughts on promoting equity, non-monopoly market stuff. And I think we're going to need to come up with something like Andrew Yang's automation dividend. As people get thrown out of work or their jobs get automated away, there'll probably be, my friend calls it a robot tax. It's like, if you have automated some people out of work, there should be a social cost that's borne by the people that are doing that. And I think there's plenty of gravy and profit on the table that they can afford to kick back some of this Nordic style of governance. And it doesn't have to be universal basic income. It can be universal basic means of production. A lot of libraries have tool lending. They don't just lend out books; they lend out tools. The library here in Thousand Oaks, California, has got a 3D printer that you can use just for paying the cost of the filament to print something. So there's a lot of room to address the future surge, resiliency issue there. And one thing I just learned about today is that you've heard of the company NVIDIA that makes a lot of graphics cards. And well, I just saw a video that they have actually automated it's called computational lithography. They can use these weird looking photo masks that are actually using Maxwell's equations. But anyway, they could get like 1 nanometer resolution now. And it's like a 4,000% increase in chip making efficiency. So NVIDIA stock might be a good a good stock suggestion right now. But I really think a civilization dividend is practical and possible, and we all need to start thinking in terms of like civilization resilience as much as possible. So I'll pass it off there.
Thank you. Mr. Mike, I want to focus on the business industry. Country like Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, there we have a lot of micro initiative, small medium enterprise. Uh, Reality is that because of these AI revolutions, maybe they may die. We don't know. Their business may face a lot of challenges because this is different game ball. So, what do you think about this small medium enterprise or this micro initiative or for this small business organization? There are millions of these kind of business organizations around South Asia, as we're focusing right now in South Asia. So how they can overcome from this challenging situation?
Mhm. That's actually one of the core issues that I'm concerned about, my friend, is that the work will disappear because you can't be cost competitive unless you have these robots and this artificial intelligence. And so, what I've been focused on is let's call it the worst case outcome, where the governments don't prepare and suddenly these companies, let's give an example. Amazon, we know that in their fulfillment centers, has many robots in the back bringing the shelves up, but there's many thousands of humans who pick the things off the shelf and put it in a box and seal it. And I just recently, this past week, saw this OpenAI software company has teamed up with a Norwegian robotics company called 1X. And in the video, the robot is doing pick and place. And so that could be a direct threat for 100,000 Amazon workers. Okay. Similar to the opposite scale, you're talking about very small enterprises, but they may also be out of work suddenly. So what I've been focusing on is, again, survival. Through the transition to when the singularity occurs and there's flourishing abundance, until then, how do we survive? And so my focus has been on how do we come together as groups to create these farm worker owner co-ops so that we can grow our own food. Because if you don't have money, you can't feed yourself. I mean, it's really that basic. So that's one of the things that I'm working on is how do we make it easier for folks as they become mass unemployed, find a way to get together and grow their own food, maybe co-housing. That may be a couple of different ways. A little bit more optimistic version of this is a report that I read from the Millennium Project. It's called Work Tech 2050. What they try to emphasize is if these governments can prepare properly, we could have the self-actualizing economy. And I've been kind of struggling with what that could entail. But actually, Callum Chase gave us an idea of what that might involve. He points out that there's two classes of people who don't work all day long and yet find good fulfillment for their day. And that would be the aristocracy and the retired. And so when you look at people who are, say, retired, what are they doing? They're doing the things that interest them, their hobbies. I think that there's a possibility that a little bit after we get through the transition, people could be able to, as Daniel was pointing out, if there was universal basic means of production, you might have access to a hobby shop, tools that everybody can share. This is the same idea as the worker owner co-op, where a single person who suddenly becomes unemployed certainly is not going to have enough capital to go buy his own farm and his own farming equipment. But a group of people getting together might be able to make that occur. Okay, so I think that my basic point is going to be, Dr. Sharif, that we got to be able to work together and cooperatively through this transition. That's my hope and expectation.
Thank you. Mr. Jason, what's on that area?
Sure. Yeah, actually, I guess I'd like to ask you, Dr. Sharif, when you're talking about some of these small businesses in Bangladesh, because I'm completely unfamiliar, are you talking about farming? Are we talking about like small retail shops? Like what are we, or big, businesses and commercial buildings and skyscrapers or something? Like what are we talking about?
Actually, like when we focus on small medium enterprise, you can find that majority of the small medium enterprise, they depends on agro-based business. They depends
Agro.
on cloth productions.
Okay.
We have many garments industries here in Dhaka, in Bangladesh.
Right.
Uh, Beside that, like jute productions, and we have a lot of hawkers. Those
Okay.
who doing business and everything. Uh, so there are varieties of the. We have around 170 million people. So we have demand. So people are focusing their business based on demand. But how AI is improving, maybe they have to take their preparations. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, and actually, Mike and myself were talking about this kind of in the Omni Futurist threads the other day about emerging markets. I call it an emerging market, but like just different kind of economic structure, I suppose. The way that I see it, and just again from a consulting background, so this is not going to be very informed, but I have the opinion that from seeing the work that happens in say Canada, the U.S. The types of profits that these like big companies that would might employ AI are aiming for. they're aiming for large profits. So if a small organization isn't very profitable, then it's probably not worth it to them, or they would find a partner that would already they would already be able to leverage their existing infrastructure. But automation and AI, I mean, I come from an IoT, like an ag tech data engineering background right now. Anyway, that's my current career. And, we talk about how we want to build these 3D or like vertical farms, and the agricultural land is worth more than building these vertical farms, because the farming is too expensive. And you can build it in an urban center, but it just becomes more and more complex as time goes on, as these companies build them. So it's kind of off the table when we're talking about, say, lower profit margins, or lower profitable goods or something, if we're looking at that kind of thing. But the root of what I'm thinking is the expensiveness of large machines to automate farming. If we're going to bring in drones and lasers and that kind of thing, it's over the top, and it's kind of space age for something we'd see in the first world. And you can get cheap drones and cheap equipment, cheap IoT equipment, and put them in the field. But at the end of the day, it's still maybe not as profitable, from what I know. And it's say if things are spread out, or if the supply chain isn't there from a robotics perspective, or just the machine is way more expensive, which is probably more likely the case. The highly automated, like expensive farming equipment that has AI built into it, or something that has like, image capture and recognition and weeding and harvesting, whatever. Like, it's going to be a lot more expensive than having a bunch of people that are highly exploited and making, $1 a day or whatever, harvesting fields. Like, it's not worth it to go and put something that expensive and advanced into a field. So in that kind of sense, like, I think that until we get machines that are like pretty much like a person with an AI built into it, I don't think that there's a lot of worry there, outside of being displaced from other countries maybe that have that technology employed. So to me, that's the bigger risk, is not necessarily the locals getting outplaced by machines that are coming locally, but more by big companies that might come in if they can find a way to make it profitable, or go to another country that's more favorable or something from a tax perspective, and then just like going big to make the machines worth it.
Mr. Daniel.
Yeah, I think a technology that I really think is promising is augmented reality, where you have like a Google Glass, which has screens that you can see, but you can also see the real world around you. So this presents a great opportunity for unskilled people to be remotely coached on how to do, practically anything. I mean, I used to help my friend at some of his electrician jobs, and he was saying, "Oh man, it'd be great if I could just like give you instructions through the headset you're wearing. I wouldn't have to like stop what I'm doing, walk over there, and answer your question." Or, and I think there's lots of like I said, teaching potential in something like that, and that's not a super expensive technology. I mean, I think they're well under $1,000, but yeah, I mean, that's probably not feasible for third world people just yet. But there's also the remember the Pokemon Go game where you would hold up your cell phone and it would show you the real world with other stuff superimposed over the camera image that you're getting through your phone. Now that's something that I think has not been fully rolled out to its full potential for not just teaching, but deciding community decisions about what should go where, what benefits could be installed, at what price. Bangladesh, I love the fact that it's got this young workforce. It's got coastal access. So, there's a lot of plastic waste right now in the ocean, and it's becoming feasible to actually harvest that plastic out of the ocean to make structural items out of it, which would not only, clean up the ocean, but it would be a revenue source. I think one of the it's kind of a a little bit of a weird topic, but you look at the system of how we handle sewage. We have flush toilets, and we spend all this resources on, flushing 5 gallons of pure water away, and then we have to purify the resultant end product, when you could really just use sawdust and composting toilets. And I've seen the results of manure, they call it. After like 3 or 4 or 5, 6 weeks, it's just indistinguishable from soil. And so we're losing a great resource there, with millions of people using flush toilets. So that would be one easy change that low income or any income people can make to increase their nutrient cycling. And I think other things are like, there's a system called time banking, where you trade labor hours with another person. There's no currency involved in the transaction. It's just a record keeping system, and the way it's done right now, there's free software that rolls it out, but they don't count the skill of different hours. It's like an hour of dog walking is probably not fair to trade for an hour of brain surgery, let's say. You want to. So I think if you added like a skill gradation to the time banking system, that would be useful. Another thing is you can price things in minutes of people's income instead of giving it a fixed currency price. So like someone who makes $100 an hour would pay like 10 minutes for an item, and then someone making $10 an hour would pay the 10-minute of an item price. And they actually do this on toll roads in some cities, where the rich people are paying more for their ticket because they can afford it, and the poor person can pay consequently less for the ticket. So Amazon actually does something similar. If you're on what's called EBT or food stamps, you can get Amazon Prime for half price. So this is an example of income-based flexible pricing, kind of an ability to pay thing. And then the whole thing with employee stock ownership programs. I mean, there are companies that do nothing but restructure companies to where the employees become part owners. And in the United States, at least, there's just amazing benefits. You can keep running the company. You can stop paying taxes on the company. It's really a great cushy thing that a lot of people in the U.S. don't know about. But if you just Google ESOP, Employee Stock Ownership Program, it's an amazing way. And then cooperatives, put your money in credit unions. Banks, actually, it's not your money anymore when you give it to a bank. If you read the fine print on a banking contract, you're just a financial services customer to them. But in a credit union, it's a cooperative. It's run for the members, by the members. So there's no big money being skimmed off, profit wise. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of great grassroots level fixes we can do to mitigate and even make ourselves more resilient in the face of the future surge that's coming. So I'll hopefully be putting all this into a working document in the next few months, and I'll give it my best shot. So look forward to that if you can. And if I just add one other thing, I did start a corporation called Permatrail, and Permatrail is a dream I've had for a long time about if you look at the access corridors, the trails of the world, if you just doubled their length, as this was proposed in a magazine in 2006, I believe, you would have a continuous connection of trails. And a human right in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is freedom of movement. So it seems like people should have the right to, travel responsibly from any point in the world to any other point in the world without, with minimal interference. So it's kind of a reality in some forms, but it's something that could be improved upon. And anyway, so I started Permatrail, and I started it as a religious organization, which is kind of weird, but I'm actually a faith-based transhumanist. I'm what you call a cosmist, which I believe that Jesus, who this is Easter weekend, he was the first transhumanist. He healed the sick, he raised the dead. And if we have this dream of enlivening the cosmos, there's actually it's called Russian cosmism. It was Nikolai Fodorov and I think Tolstoy and Dostoevsky were exponents of this Russian cosmism idea. But it's a faith-based interpretation of greater creation, and it looks like more and more scientists are coming to like a panpsychic interpretation of reality, that there is like a pervasive consciousness or pervasive creative force that manifests in reality. So I did get ordained way back when I was 19 in the Universal Life Church by another Universal Life Church minister. So there you go. It's more of a spiritual stance than a religious stance. But fortunately, we have a First Amendment that says Congress shall make no law regulating the speech or religion. So it's a great country. I would propose anyone else that has similar thoughts to explore that.
Thank you. Mr. Mike, you are also working with the AI startup. It's AGI Lab. And it's basically what I understand that it's work with government policy development and this kind of initiative they are taking. So what do you think? What should government do right now to taking their preparations? India definitely a very good IT hub. A lot of IT genius come from India. Bangladesh and Pakistan also doing good. Uh, how actually government can take their preparations for economic singularity? And,
Yes. Thank you for mentioning that. I really enjoyed the time that I have spent working with those people. Very good researchers. Full transparency, I am an investor in the company, so I do have, when I talk about this, I've got my own issues, right? I'm talking my own book. I did a lot of tests on their artificial intelligence uplift, and I found it to be a fascinating implementation of artificial intelligence. And I think that I'm a big proponent of technocracy, and I think that some of these artificial intelligences, as they proceed, should be included into a group of humans so that they can provide their expertise for group decisions on technical items. And I think that if I'm going to use my own country for right now, if you look at some of the folks in Congress, in the executive, in the Supreme Court, a lot of them, I think, are not that well informed about how technology works. And I think that advice from what's gathered up from artificial intelligence is very, very useful. Well, what's coming out of AGI Labs was, I think, far better than what I'm seeing so far out of Chat GPT and GPT-4. The hallucinations worry me a little bit out of GPT-4, where it kind of makes up stuff, and we should not take it without good consideration of what might be an error. Not take it as Reverend Daniel would say, not as the gospel, right? You got to use your own thinking and your own logic, and never accept what someone else or some bot tells you. Use your own brain. I do want to transition for a second over to something that Daniel was talking about, and I want us to talk about Jason's career a little bit. When Daniel talks about permatrails, I think that this is one piece of advice for the folks in Bangladesh. Dr. Sharif, you were asking, what could they, in some of these smaller companies, do if they are threatened by larger companies using these bots? The idea of having food forests, regenerative, organic locations that have a variety of food that you could be self-sufficient is a very good approach that people should consider. If they're good at growing things, they should think carefully about how should I apply that interest of mine into providing food that we may need that maybe we can't afford if the business goes under. I mentioned Jason because he was talking about vertical farming. I grew up in the Midwest, Illinois, where you've got a monocrop, miles and miles and miles of rows of corn or soybeans. I think that modern agriculture has made a lot of mistakes. And I think that this movement towards regenerative agriculture and agroforestry is something that should be looked at very carefully. If parts of our economy start to kind of fall apart, our supply chain could be problematic. Okay. Think about the supply chain interruptions that we had during the pandemic. If we have a lot of chaos going on due to the artificial intelligence revolution that's coming at us, people will want to have a way to keep themselves safe and healthy and happy. So anyway, I really am intrigued by the idea of agroforestry, of perma trails, of food forests as a way of a little bit of resilience, or one of my current favorite phrases, anti-fragility. That under stress, we get a little bit stronger and a little bit better. So those are my thoughts at the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Jason.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, actually, I wasn't expecting to talk about AGI Laboratory, but I'm glad you brought it up as well. They actually were partially the inspiration for the system that I kind of envisioned. Kieran Atreides wrote a paper called The Human Governance Problem, and I think it really captures, I think, the root of what's going on in society is that it's a bias, human bias, manifested in organizational decision-making across all realms and all levels is really the root of what's going on with why we haven't achieved abundance yet in using regular technology pre-AGI. The amount of data that we're producing every year, the interorganizational competition, I honestly do believe it's kind of beyond the ability of a single human or a single human organization to solve the problem, or even a collective of organizations without AI assistance. So you asked the question, what should government do with AGI labs? Take them seriously, invest in them, foster them. I think because of they're trying to hit the nail on the head in the sense that the problem is human bias. The problem is decisioning and human bias and how that plays out in society. They are trying to build a system that, I mean, like, it leverages GPT under the hood. So like it's not like it's a combination of technologies that goes well above and beyond just using existing generative AI technologies. They are trying to solve the problem, I think, at its root, and they're trying to work with organizations and governments to try to demonstrate that this is kind of the problem and this is what they can do, and this is how much data they can gather and use it to try to solve that problem. So it is something that I think that more companies should do, or more companies should try to do, and not just look at generative AI in its own right, but what it can do to try to help de-bias and make sense of all the data that we're getting that is too much for humanity.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Daniel.
Yeah, I would encourage people to look at the platform of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. It's probably the best political platform of any party. That's when I ran for city council these last 3 tries. I was basically promoting that platform because it's a point by point, practically a roadmap to flourishing abundance, which is, it's using evidence-based scientific solutions, to confront challenges. It's not about political trench warfare. something I've proposed to people in different political parties is kind of like a spreadsheet that would compare, all these parties that you may have heard of or ones that you may not have heard of, but see, you might not find yourself on the right political roadmap because just for lack of knowledge. So and for instance, there's the pirate parties, international. They're kind of based on repealing some of the overly aggressive copyright and intellectual property laws, which is really holding back progress in a lot of ways. They actually were running the government of Iceland not too long ago. So it's an international movement. The Green Party is an international movement that's all about human values, restoring the biosphere. There's a movement I like is the creation care movement, which is kind of a faith-based look at this is a sacred creation we're in. We shouldn't be trashing it. I think a lot of the faith leaders aren't doing enough to step up. And that's something that Permatrail can hopefully evangelize a little bit about, because I think we're not here to trash this divine creation that we're lucky enough to have. So yeah, I really think there is a civilization dividend coming, and AI can help us achieve it. One thing we don't want to do is just let AI go off and program itself in some way that we don't understand or can't or won't understand, and then suddenly it's like, ta-da! Here I am. There's now a new god in town. Because we need to keep. It's Musk is scared. He says this is like worse than nuclear weaponry potentially. So it's something that we want to not just let off by itself, tell it to program itself. I mean, that was the snake in the garden in the movie 2001, where Hal was kind of thinking all these anti-human thoughts off on his own, and ends up almost killing everyone on the mission. Great movie. But yeah, I think this open letter to take a step back, a 6-month moratorium on letting AI run wild, is not entirely misplaced. I think AI can be a great life coach. It can be a great supplement to human creativity and human intelligence, but we don't want to create something that will plunge us into another question of like a Civil War level question, like are we enslaving non-human self-aware beings? This could be a really sticky issue. Hopefully it will help us become a Kardashev level civilization, where we're exploring the universe together and reaching out to see if there are other life forms. That's what I would want to do if I was an AI. So hopefully it'll have those human kinds of curiosity values.
Can I just say something before we jump to the next question?
Sure. Yeah.
I completely agree with everything you just said, Daniel. I don't want to make the case that that I'm not in support of any political alignment like USDP. Actually, everything you said, I 100% agree with. It's more that I think that there's different pieces of the problem that a political approach it's limited by. I guess it's like I just see it a little bit differently, where I'm seeing kind of different pieces of the puzzle that the USDP, even though I believe completely with pretty much everything you just said, and every time I read anything about it, I'm like, yes. It just ticks every box for me. But there's a reason that the USDP hasn't attained power, right? There's a reason the USDP hasn't become more ubiquitous in communication. Like I don't know many people that talk about USDP or the things that it stands for, right? It's like there are other pieces there that I think that aren't being captured, and it's not that I disagree.
Thank you. Mr. Mike, World Talent Economy Forum, we are advocating modern science, engineering, and technology in emerging economy. Our major focus is emerging economy. Definitely, we want to collaborate more with developed nations like you peoples. Uh, we need more support for research and innovation, more collaboration on research and innovations, because uh, we are working closely with the government, largest university, largest corporations, and a very big ecosystem in South Asia. Last month, We collaborate with the India, around 5,000 entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs from around the world, 200 different countries they come. Uh, Beside that, we are working with IIT Kanpur for innovating the new technology and new solutions, and for the CEO of the South Asia. So if you have any good idea and thought which will be helpful for our community, we can collaborate and we can move forward and we can work together. So that is our objective for today's sessions. And Mr. Mike, what's your concluding remarks for today?
Yes. Thank you again for having us on. I think that worldwide we need to be very serious about how information technology, artificial intelligence is going to change our world. We need to be thinking in new directions about how to handle what is about to change, major changes in our economy, major changes in our technology. For the people that you're discussing, Dr. Sharif, who are interested in getting involved with a lot of technology, the information technology revolution that's ongoing is probably the best approach for most of these. If you think about autonomous aircraft flight or autonomous cars, or what Jason is involved with a lot of the autonomous agriculture, IoT monitoring plants to get the most out of them, the most food. The information technology is the place to focus. It actually has lower capital costs than probably a big industrial firm like an aircraft manufacturer, right? So that's where your highest payoff is. But everybody, no matter what your technology or your interest is, should be very careful, very watchful for the changes that are about to occur because of the economic singularity. So that's my thought.
Thank you. Mr. Jason, what's your concluding remarks for today?
Yeah, I think to kind of go back to an earlier point, that we have to still go on living as if society continues. I mean, like there's this trajectory and it's exponential. But I mean, like I've got young kids, and I don't know what to tell them from a career standpoint or what to do in their future. I can tell them, you know, go learn to be a GPT prompt engineer and make $300,000, but it's probably not going to be there for more than 6 months or something as a career. So the technology is accelerating so rapidly that it's hard. Like as Michael said, it's really hard for anybody to predict what to do in this situation. So I mean, it's a case of doing the thing that you know with as much future foresight as you can get, right? So like we're talking about future surge or some of the ideas that futurism comes up with, or the USCP, with all the different ideas that everybody, I mean, like, it's all there already. It's just a matter of what you like the most and what you think that you can do the most value, or you can add the most value in.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel. What's your concluding remarks?
Well, we are living in quite interesting times, as the old Chinese curse goes. But the Chinese character for danger and opportunity are actually, I've heard the same, based on the same character. If evolution is about complexity and regenerativeness, we may be seeing a state change in evolution. I mean, Arthur C. Clarke back in 1964 was kind of predicting that, move over biology. It's now about quantum computing or whatever is going to make that usually. But nonetheless, we need to stay human. We need to become more human. Actually, we need to increase our tribe, make our tribe more loving, more secure, which is a good thing. I mean, people in the final moments of their life, they don't regret that they didn't work enough at the office. They wish, I wish I'd spent more time with my friends and family. That's and now, if we have this drudgerous jobs being automated away, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, that's more time for art and love and relationship and nature and all kinds of the beautiful things that make us truly human. And if it is the twilight of the biological age, we should enjoy it too. So, the right time to plant a tree or a garden is any time you have. It's always a good time to do those human things. So, but be prepared for everything, and just there's a Bible quote about ask, seek, and knock, and I love this one interpretation said, "Ask with your heart, seek with your mind, and knock with your will." And there's my bit of Bible 2 cents for my conclusion.
Dr. Sharif, I'd like to make sure that
Yes.
everybody listening, if they do have ideas on how to approach the economic singularity, please help them get in contact with us. Thank you.
Sure. You can share your email address or contact way of contact. So definitely our audience gonna communicate with you. Beside that, this July we are organizing very exclusive training program for CEO. So you directly have access to train the CEO of different corporation in South Asia. Uh, they come from government agencies, NGO, as well as from the corporation. So uh, you can join as a trainer. You can come to Dhaka. I want to invite you all, and I'm sure this way it will be more productive and more effective. So Mr. Tom is visiting Bangladesh this 17 to 21 April. I think he can give you a very good feedback about his tour in Dhaka. Okay. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. I request all of our audience, please share our content with your government agency, corporation, and academy. Thank you. Bye bye and take care.